Chapter 2. Age of Gods, Thousand-Fold System. Translator, EndlessFantasy Translation Editor, EndlessFantasy Translation. Sullo did not expect that his divine domain, which originally encompassed a single plane and planet, would actually expand to become a thousand-planet plane. Not to mention, as a new god who had just opened up the divine domain for the first time, even some of the older, upper-level gods probably did not have divine domains of such a scale. As the only master of the divine domain, Sullo could easily take control of the entire thousand-sided plane. The divine domain was desolate. There were no flowers, trees, or any living beings, let alone any believers. One had to know that the reason why faith gods were powerful was because they could absorb their believers' faith in them to strengthen themselves. Without believers, it meant that they could not collect any faith power nor further increase their strength to build their divine domain. Seeing this, Sullo couldn't help but frown as he pondered over how to solve this problem. At that moment, his eyes suddenly lit up as he clapped his hands and laughed. That's right, that's right. Isn't there still a god market? Why don't I go there and try my luck and see if I can buy some suitable believer seeds? As gods roamed the endless void to conquer native planes while collecting resources, subduing believers, and strengthening their own powers, the god trade market was a place where countless gods would gather together to sell their idle resources and take what they needed. Here, one could buy believers of different races, from ordinary Tier 1 beastmen to dragons and other creatures with divine battle prowess. They sold anything one could imagine under the sun. One could also look for powerful divine artifacts, miraculous potions, broken divine domains, and other items. It could be said that in the god market, there were only things that one could not buy. It was what they simply could not afford. The god market that Sullo had chosen belonged to the domain of the preparatory gods. There was a limit to the strength of the believers that could be bought. Most of them were in the Tier 1 to 3 range, and their belief points ranged from 10 to 100,000 points. The reason why there was such a huge difference was because different believers had different aptitudes. The higher the aptitudes, the higher the growth limit, and more belief points were needed. The moment he walked into the market, a lively atmosphere enveloped him. The bustling market was so crowded that he was practically elbow to elbow with everyone else. This was no surprise. After all, the preparatory seminary was about to allow a batch of gods to graduate. It was only natural that there would be people. The number and types of believers that currently existed in the trading market were also very large. The first thing that Sullo saw was a group of rat people who were less than 1.2 meters tall and wore gray robes. These creatures were relatively small and very weak. They were at the bottom of the food chain. However, they were also good at digging holes and reproduced at a fast rate. As long as there was enough food, the rat people's numbers would grow rapidly. As a result, they were liked by many new gods. However, Sullo still shook his head, not enticed by the prospect as he turned to look at other things. Rat people were just far too ugly to him. The second stall sold a group of 2.5-meter-tall taurens with strong bodies. They were completely different from the rat people from before. These tauren had strong combat strength, were good at farming land, and could make tools. Unfortunately, they were too gluttonous and Sullo was not wealthy. After that, he looked at more than 10 stalls. There were strange creatures such as gnolls, centaurs, dwarves, ogres, and vampires. But what interested Sullo the most was a group of night elves and a fire dragon. Night elves were creatures that wore tight-fitting leather armor. They had purple hair and slim but voluptuous figures. They could be said to be the most beautiful creatures among all believers. Putting aside their combat power, just their eye-pleasing ability alone was enough to make people feel satisfied. As for the fire dragon, it was a powerful creature still in its infancy and had an epic-level aptitude. Once it matured, its strength would be comparable to that of a demigod, and it would be incomparably powerful. If nurtured properly, it might even be possible for it to advance to a divine level. Unfortunately, one night elf would cost 1,000 faith points, and the fire dragon was priced at 60,000 faith points. Seeing this, Sullo waved his hands and shouted, "I'm sorry to disturb you." The 1,000 faith points provided by the school had already been used up after igniting the divine fire and condensing his divine spark. He only had 3,000 faith points that had been left behind by his parents, so he couldn't afford to make such a purchase. At this moment, Sullo suddenly noticed that a stall was completely surrounded by people. These people weren't antis buying vegetables at the market. Instead, they were gods with holy auras circulating around their bodies and halos resting above their heads. Solo originally thought that it had to be some sort of rare treasure that could catch people's attention in such a way. He originally didn't want to get involved, but a voice from the group made him stop in his tracks. Brother, it's already been a week but you haven't sold a single tree spirit yet? That's right, this brother has been here for several days but in the end, there hasn't been a single buyer interested. These spirit trees are weak and can't move. They've obviously been injured by fire attacks. Who would be foolish enough to buy them? Solo's heart was moved and he went in to take a look. He saw the words, 3,000 third-tier tree spirit, priced at 3,000 faith points. No bargaining, was written on the sign. The surrounding gods ridiculed the tree spirits with disdain. Clearly, they didn't think that anyone would spend money to buy such a creature with so many flaws. But unexpectedly, a slightly young and immature voice caused the gods to turn around and look at him. For 3,000 faith points, I'll take as many spirit trees as you'll give me. The moment these words were said, everyone was in an uproar, their eyes filled with disbelief. 3,000 faith points. Even if a lower god didn't eat or drink for 100 years, he might not be able to accumulate enough. This young man was actually using it to buy a bunch of tree spirits with many flaws. How could this not be surprising? The person who set up the stall was a mysterious god covered in a black cloak. His age was unknown. In the face of the god's denouncement, he had always acted as if he was unperturbed and unmoved. Seeing that Solo had made a bid, he did not waste any time and said in a low voice, if you give me another 3,000 faith power, I'll throw in another 10-tier TWP tree spirit elders. The two of them discussed the terms and completed the transaction, completely ignoring the taunts and jealous words of the surrounding gods. After completing the transaction, Solo took the spatial sphere containing 3,000 tree spirits and returned home. These tree spirits were indeed as the other gods had said. They were weak and could not move, heavily injured by fire attacks. But there was no other way. They were cheap. After all, even those weak mouse people were sold for 10 faith points each. Besides, these tree spirits were slightly stronger than the rat people in general, yet were only being sold for 1 faith point each. They were practically being given away for free. Moreover, Solo still had a great weapon. This was where his confidence lay. With a thought, Solo brought the spatial sphere into his divine domain. He removed the spatial sphere's seal and branded his own imprint into the souls of these tree spirits. With this, the tree spirits officially became his believers. Although they were now considered the lowest level of believers, he would slowly be able to raise their faith levels as long as he spent a certain amount of energy. He would make them reach the level of true believers, devout believers, fanatics. Even saints and holy spirits. I have seen the great God, your divine might is endless. May your divine power be eternal, may your divine fire never be extinguished, may your divine domain be majestic. Name, tree spirit. Type, monster. Strength, tier 1. Aptitude, normal. Talent, none. Skill, entanglement, level 1. Status, shallow believer, can provide 1 faith point per day. 3,000 tree spirits at the shallow believer level could provide 3,000 faith points per day. After refinement, he could obtain 3 wisps of faith power. It would take around 3 years to accumulate the 3,000 faith points he had used to buy them. However, Solo did not mind. Things were always difficult at the beginning. He still had an infinite life ahead of him. Once the tree spirits landed in the divine realm, their branches and leaves continuously vibrated, sending out streams of consciousness towards Solo as they constantly praised their new and mighty god. At this moment, a cold and mechanical voice sounded yet again. Ding! Congratulations, host. You have obtained 3,000 tree spirits. The 1,000-fold amplification system has been activated. You have obtained a world tree made out of 3,000 tree spirits.